Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Mist. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Nathaniel Thompson, thank you for talking to me. You've written and taught a lot about film over the years. May you please give my audience a sense of what you've accomplished in the world of film commentary?
Sure. I kind of got into commentaries by accident because I was a DVD producer for about 10 years for a company called Image Entertainment, which was originally they were like one of the two big heavy hitters in the world of laserdiscs. It's way back in the day. And when I was out of college, I took over kind of marketing and producing a lot of special editions. So I was in charge of things like Something Weird Video and like the Euroshock line and stuff like that. So I got to rub shoulders with a lot of guys like Ted B. Michaels and Radley Metzger and Herschel Gordon Lewis and Mike Brainey and Something Weird, all those guys. And they needed someone to moderate the commentaries there. And so that's how I got into that. And I just it became sort of a hobby, and I've been doing it ever since on and off. It's like people just keep asking me to do it. It's not even something I chase down that much, but I've got about 200 commentaries, I think, under my belt. All kinds of movies, not just horror and exploitation, but, Ridley Scott movies and art films and Claude Chabrol and that kind of stuff. So, you name it.
God, that's incredible. Well, it's certainly an enviable lifestyle, I think at least. But as far as smut goes, how important are the films of Russ Meyer?
Very important. He's someone who Russ Meyer's interesting because he was someone who I read about a lot more before I could actually see his films, because when I was a little kid, even 8 years old or whatever, I was reading stuff like the Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film and Danny Peary's Guide to the Film Fanatic, stuff like that. And so I kept reading about these. It was Russ Meyer and Radley Metzger were the two that I kept reading about, and their movies just sounded incredible. Like, it wasn't even the sex part. It was just, they just sounded like just these incredible viewing experiences. Like, the stills just really caught my imagination. And so it was kind of my mission to hunt down Russ Meyer movies, and eventually I found a video store that carried them because, as you know, he's not a studio guy. These weren't things that someone like Fox or Paramount put out, except for, two exceptions, but we'll go into that, I assume. And but he's really, really important, and I didn't realize just how much till I was watching his movies, and I was like, I didn't know people could do movies like that, like the way that they were edited and shot, and the dialogue and everything, just the pattern of it. It was so aggressive, and I think Russ is still important. I don't think anyone makes movies quite like that even now. That even with MTV, no one's really managed to perfect that editing style the way that Russ did. I think he's still one of a kind.
Yeah, so what do you think Russ's catalog will be more widely available on Blu-ray? You had the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls criterion, and that's lovely, but I feel like there's just huge holes right there. Yeah,
I think he's kind of a cautionary tale, because being independent is great and having control of your library, but the problem is when you're no longer to handle it yourself, then you really, it's a crapshoot what happens to your legacy. I mentioned Radley was the same way, that he owned almost all of his films. And once you're in poor health or once you're dead, then it falls into whoever's nearby and whoever happens to be the last person you leave your estate to. And the problem with Russ is that there just isn't that desire to maintain that legacy for the public anymore. They did try that one-off thing with putting Faster Pussycat Kill Kill on Blu-ray, and that was it. And I guess maybe it didn't sell well, or I don't know. I know there's a lot of people have strong feelings about where the estate is right now. I won't go into that, but I hope that they see the light at some point, because I know Arrow Video back in the day on DVD, they really tried to do new transfers, and when they did their DVDs way back, and they just kept hitting a wall. And I hope eventually it just crumbles. They'll see the light and realize that this stuff really should be treated well, and these negatives need to be transferred and restored and maintained the way that they deserve to be, because they're major American films, and it's just a shame that they're locked up in a vault right now.
There's, to me at least, no sense of irony in a Russ Meyer movie. He actually seems to truly love everything he is showing, like war and boobs. And
for sure.
And Andy Sedaris, to me, was like that as well. Do you think there could be like someone like that in a contemporary sense? Like, not that there is now, but could there be?
I think there could be. The problem is the tide has to turn when it comes to sex on film, because we're in a weird place right now where it's just something you can't put in theaters. And I think the fact that there's porn out there, people don't understand the value of what, I don't even know if I should call it softcore. Like Andy Sedaris, I wouldn't even call it softcore, because the sex isn't really the point. And in a lot of cases, Russ isn't either. I think a lot of Russ's films don't even really qualify as sex films. When you really look at them start to finish, there are a lot of them that are really odd outliers. But I don't know. I think stylistically we could have another Russ, but they would have to come from the same background, because he was a guy who really lived life. He was a photographer. He was in combat. And that's how I think his attitude developed, that he was a real God guy. He was an all-American. He's like, the cheeseburger of American directors in the best possible way. And I think cheeseburger's delicious, but you've got to have that life experience. And now we have people who are directing movies who are basing their careers off of other directors and what they've learned watching, 80s movies and things. But I think we have to snap back out of that, and it has to be based off of life experience again, so you can have your own voice that develops the way that his did, because nobody made movies like that ever. And no one else could imitate it. But I think it is possible. I think the tide will turn eventually because people can only watch the same thing for so long, and it's got to be different at some point.
Yeah, I really YouTube and the web has so much interesting content. Maybe something like that could happen in the future, not like on a more underground sense. If you can't, because it's so hard to compete with Marvel in these property projects. Yeah.
I mean, you never know where it could come out from. I think the last time we had someone who I think could compete with him was I think Paul Verhoeven was kind of in the same territory with something like Basic Instinct or Showgirls. I think you had that kind of attitude in a way. Maybe John McNaughton's Wild Things. I think that was the last gasp before you saw the real legacy of Russ up on the big screen, I think. And ever since then, it's been missing a lot. And it'll come around. People will discover eventually, and I think he will kick some people in the butt, start making movies with that kind of ferocity again. Somewhere down the line, I hope, and that kind of gusto, that joie de vivre that he has.
Yeah, I hope so. Hustlers was good too. I think it was trying to fashion itself as like a sex worker, like a Goodfellas for like sex workers. But if you actually did that, if you actually went there, like little girls couldn't sleep at night. That would be so scary. Fast and Pussycat Kill is definitely that Russ Meyer movie with the most name recognition. But what are some of your personal favorites?
See, that's a tough one because they're kind of like phases in his career. So comparing like Faster Pussycat to something like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, it's almost psychotic because they're so completely different. But Faster Pussycat, I think, is a perfect film. There isn't a frame in it that I would change. I think if you want to know what a Russ Meyer movie is, that's a good one to start with because it has enough of a linear plot where I think a newcomer could walk right into it, and it's the perfect gateway film. And even today, I think it plays really well today because whereas a lot of again, I don't want to call it a sex film because there really isn't much sex in it, but films that supposedly objectify women, which I guess his films do, even though I think he also creates interesting female characters. But Faster Pussycat plays well because it's completely dominated by those women, and they're not victimized, except for one of them, of course, obviously, but it's the other women doing it. So but that's a really good starter one. I don't know if I'd call it his best or my favorite because, again, it kind of changes depending on my mood. I think Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is the one that really shook me up the most. That one actually felt like it was rewiring my brain while I was watching it the very first time. And every time I go back and watch it again, there's no other movie that looks or feels like that. I think maybe because he had a big budget and he was shooting in scope and the way he uses color in that movie, and there is not a single shot in that movie that's off. Your eye is just constantly bouncing around through that entire movie. It's kind of a little miracle, I think, of a film.
Yeah, and speaking of which, it was co-written by Roger Ebert.
Yeah, not the only one either.
Yeah. Jeez. So, as a film critic yourself, would you hypothetically co-write a film with a guy like Russ Meyer?
Oh, God, yeah, in a heartbeat. Of course. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, one thing that some people say, like John Waters, is that after Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, Russ kind of, his work started to lack some inspiration. What do you think? What do you think of that argument?
I don't think it lacked inspiration. I think that the tide turned as far as what people wanted to see in movies, and I think that confused him because, again, that's, Deep Throat, of course, hit, around 73, and I think that threw everybody for a loop a little bit because they didn't know which way to turn. And obviously he didn't want to do hardcore porn, so, he decided to take what he was doing and ramp it up, twice as hard as he did before. And it's a matter of taste. I mean, I think, if someone wanted to know what Russ was, I would never throw them face first into, Super Vixen. I don't think that would get a very good response just because it's so extreme. And even if you're a seasoned Russ viewer, I think Super Vixens or or Up, for example, I think they're tough to take if you don't really understand where he's coming from. Because if you think that he's speaking literally, you're going to be in trouble. It's the same thing with Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. I mean, I remember a lot of people had trouble with the ending of that because you had the narrator doing that moralistic voiceover stuff and the wedding and all that, and they thought suddenly Russ had become this conservative, jackass all of a sudden, which he hadn't, because you can't take that at face value. And it's the same with his later films. I mean, Super Vixens, that whole movie's in quotes, you know.
Yeah.
He's not saying you should go out and like stomp Sherry Eubank to death in a bathtub, you know.
Or maybe, okay, hopefully not. Vixen was a good one, though.
Oh, Vixen's great, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Vixen and
Shot in
Cherry,
Canada
Harry, and
as
Raquel,
well.
I think, are like two that are kind of bonded together in my head, because I think they're almost like avant-garde movies. It's crazy to me that people thought they were going to see skin flicks, and that's what they wound up seeing. You know, because I mean, they're so compact and so tight, but they barely have plots, and they barely even have normal scene progression in them. You know.
And Mondo Topless is a very interesting documentary about people shaking their boobs.
Right.
It's really hard to overstate the shift with the immoral Mr. T's. Mm-hmm. That was a big one.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah, I mean that was the real game changer right there. I mean, it's the whole movement of film that came out because of him. You know. Mm-hmm. Although again, that's a movie that I think is of great historical value. But again, I think if you showed that to someone cold, they'd be really baffled. But you know, it is a landmark, and that's one that I really wish they put out in a decent version, because I don't think the VHS or the DVD versions really do it justice. Because originally it was this blazingly beautiful, colorful film, and that's what made it jump out, because it was so professionally made. But that's really hard to appreciate now. If you don't see a print of it, you know, you're really out of luck right now.
God, and I'm sure they're kicking around in Los Angeles.
Sorry, what?
Are they kicking around in L.A. prints of Russ Meyer movies? Do they do screenings
No,
like that?
that's the problem, because all the prints are locked up, you know, where his house was. And I think the last time they played L.A. was I was really lucky when I first moved here in '99. Right after that, at the Egyptian Theater, they did a huge retrospective where they showed almost every film he made, pretty much on the big screen. This is when Russ was still alive. He was, you know, declining rapidly, but they had a lot of his cast members there. They had Haji and Tura Satana and all, you know, and Kitten, and all of them were there. But they showed all of them off these really gorgeous prints. And of course, you know, if you see those, you get really spoiled. Then you go watch the DVDs, and you're like, oh God, you know.
Jeez. Well, okay. So I love the John Waters quote on Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. It's something to the effect that nobody can make a film better than that movie. So what can you say? What can you tell my audience about the relationship between John Waters and Russ Meyer?
Well, they both, I think, have just such utter joy in what they do. I think they really love their characters, even the most despicable ones, which is something that I think it's kind of lost, that people think you should hate your villains, but in a way, but you have to enjoy watching them, you know. And so, like in Faster Pussycat, you know, especially Tora Satana, I mean, she's, you know, a despicable human being, but you just love watching her. I mean, just, you know, she's just tearing this, you know, this path of destruction through the desert for the entire movie, and you're just kind of like rooting for her in a way, because, you know, she's just totally unchained. There's nobody like that. And I think John Waters does that too. I mean, if you look at what he does with Divine, you know, and something like Female Trouble, I mean, that's absolutely descended from, you know, Tora Satana and, you know, a lot of Russ Meyer characters, what she does in that. And Pink Flamingos, it's that kind of, that unabashed, you know, disregard for what society says you should do, you know, which is how Russ operated too. He was like, you know what, you want me to make these normal Hollywood movies? Well, screw you. And he loved Hollywood films. You know, he took a lot from them, especially George Sidney, you know, which goes without saying, if you watch The Swinger and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I mean, there are scenes he took almost verbatim and transposed them into that story. But, you know, but he didn't want to work, you know, with those kind of constraints on that the studios would put on him. And I think that's why his films have such a strong voice and why they work so well, you know, even if that is ultimately why we can't see them now. So, you know, catch-22, I guess. I
suppose that's a great point, though. What you're saying, Tura and Divine, they had the machine gun delivery. Yeah, it's so aggressive. But it's beautiful too how they say their dialogue. The delivery is so different, though.
Yeah, it's too bad he never had Tura Satana say word like shit kicker, you know, like Divine does. Because I think you could switch their lines between each other and it would totally work, I think.
Oh God. If only there was like a crossover movie, that would be beautiful. But
wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah.
Oh God. Okay, so who are some other filmmakers people should check out if they enjoy Russ Meyer movies?
Well, I think another one who's kind of in the same vein is someone like Tinto Brass, who's kind of like the Italian Russ Meyer, except he's obsessed with butts instead of, you know, giant breasts. But
okay,
he's another one. He's always had control over his own films, except for Caligula. Obviously, is the one exception. But I love Tinto too. That was one of my my crowning glories at Image. Was I produced that ridiculous 3-disc Imperial edition of Caligula. That was kind of a dream project of mine that I put together. But I think Tinto and Russ are kind of spiritual cousins, you might say, because they also had this they had the same kind of editing style, again, that they developed themselves. It's its own language that they kind of made up. It's almost like a toddler making its own language with a camera, you know, it's that kind of effect where it's like, you know, you're like, there's something weird about this, and I can't put my finger on it, but I love it. And it kind of ruins you after a while if you watch a few of their movies, because then other movies feel just kind of boring after that.
Right. All right. Well, Nathaniel Thompson, thank you so much for your time today. What do you have planned for 2020 that you can talk about?
Well, let's see. I've got a lot more commentaries coming up. I'm working on a book for Fab Press right now that's coming out in August. Can't reveal the title yet, but it's going to be a biggie coming out in the summer. And let's see what else. Hopefully popping up in some more documentaries, I think, that are lined up. I think Arrow Video's got some coming up that I'll be turning up in. Keep your eyes open. And, yeah, other than that, we shall see.
Hopefully more commentary tracks with the great Troy Howarth.
Yes, actually, we have a lot of. That's the funny thing. There's only one that's actually out there right now, which is Conquest. But we have we've done 7 more that are just waiting. So,
7. Whoa.
So we've recorded them. It's just hopefully they'll be coming. Well, I think he's announced a few of them. Like we did 3 Dario Argento ones back to back. We did Sleepless, Phantom of the Opera, and The Card Player. And we're doing like some more Italian horror stuff coming up.
City of the Living Dead. You're doing City of the Living Dead.
Yeah. City of the Living Dead. Yeah, we're doing a couple of Umberto Lenzi movies.
Oh, that's exciting.
Which I can't say on the record yet. I'm sure by the time this comes out, maybe it'll be out there. But yeah, one's in the can. The other one's being recorded in about a week and a half. But I'm really excited about that. One of them is one of my very, very favorites of his. So it's exciting stuff.
Oh my God, Umberto Lenzi. That is someone who should never be disrespected. I love that guy.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's so fun to talk about.
Definitely. But that does it. We talked about Russ Meyer. It was a very solid first interview. I hope we get more in the can in the future.